There's no automatic rule that if the Conservative Party were to lose very, very badly, it would automatically go further to the right. We've seen it becoming increasingly right-wing and reactionary in the past few years. It is a natural thing to think that perhaps, especially with those people who are left in the party, it may do more of that. But just because Nigel Farage wants something doesn't mean it automatically happens. It is just as likely that after an election, the people who are left in that party say, well, look, clearly what we've been doing for the last few years was not the right thing to do. Clearly, we need to meet Starmer on the central ground, and that they reject Farage. It's also entirely possible that while Farage might get millions of votes, maybe the length and breadth of the country, that he won't ever get enough in one place to win a single seat.
Let's continue on Nigel Farage, shall we? Will I be leader of the opposition within 5 years? It's possible now, is the headline on the Saturday interview with him in today's Times. Andrew Billen's been speaking to him. He said the sort of sub-headline on this: Nigel Farage isn't interested in the culture wars. His focus is firmly on replacing the Tories with Reform UK in Parliament. And Christian, that's not an unrealistic prospect at this point in the campaign.
Well, no, it's not. The Reform are 2 points behind the Tories in multiple polls, 17% to 19%. I think what last night's debate could do is further ratchet that up. And I think if we get to a tipping point where Reform UK overtake the Conservatives in the middle of an election campaign with weeks to go, then things get very, very interesting. And frankly, personally, thank goodness Nigel stepped in, because it was proving an incredibly dull election campaign until he did so. I really think Nigel Farage is very serious about this. And, if you look, if the Tories go down to 60 seats, 70 seats, everything's in play at that point. Even if Reform get 3-4 seats, and that would be on a very, very good day. Again, I think, firstly, he could just be invited in. The chickens could invite the fox into the hen house by a right-wing leader. Or, actually, there will be almost no opposition to a Labour government that would have a majority of 300-odd. And they would get on with doing what they're doing for 5 years. And in the meantime, you'd have all these rats in a sack fighting out over who's the official opposition. And I think once you get to the point where the Tories are that irrelevant in the national conversation, then we in the media, voters, social media, they start, the tectonic plates really would start to shift. And I think that's where Farage wants it to be. So when he says he's the leader of the opposition, I think he's thinking about 2029. He said he's come back not just for this election, but for the next 5 years. And I think he's genuinely hoping that if the Tories are wiped out to the extent some of the polls are suggesting, that by the election after this one, Reform UK could become the official opposition in Parliament, and it would be an extraordinary moment after whatever it is, 250 years of political dominance by the Tories.
Yeah. Susie, do you give Nigel Farage's argument and the articulation there by Christian, do you give it much weight?
No, not whatsoever. There's no automatic rule that if the Conservative Party were to lose very, very badly, it would automatically go further to the right. We've seen it becoming increasingly right-wing and reactionary in the past few years. It is a natural thing to think that perhaps, especially with those people who are left in the party, it may do more of that. But just because Nigel Farage wants something doesn't mean it automatically happens. It is just as likely that after an election, the people who are left in that party say, well, look, clearly what we've been doing for the last few years was not the right thing to do. Clearly, we need to meet Starmer on the central ground, and that they reject Farage. It's also entirely possible that while Farage might get millions of votes, maybe the length and breadth of the country, that he won't ever get enough in one place to win a single seat. That's possible too. We don't really know until the night of the election. But in the meantime, just talking about him like this makes it so. And this becomes that air war I was talking about, that it becomes, the sense of where the wind is blowing, and that therefore people just sort of comply or think, oh yes, that's a jolly good idea.
But what's the alternative to speaking about a party leader who is standing to be an MP, and based on the kind of rally that he held in the constituency there, actually hundreds of people showed out to see him. So,
Well,
what's the
perhaps not
alternative?
referring to him as the leader of a party. He's the shareholder of a business. He's not got a party. I mean, yes, he's standing, and we're calling it this.
Bit of a technicality, though, isn't it?
It is a
Let's be real.
technicality, but he's not a party leader in the same way. But he doesn't have that infrastructure. I mean, in the papers today, there's another 2 reform candidates that they had to dump because of incredibly racist past social media posts. And that's sort of a habit. It seems to happen every weekend that someone finds something else. And they don't have the infrastructure to check their candidates. I mean, we've seen those problems with Labour and Tories. They've had problems with candidates too, but they do
And
at
the
least have-
Greens. It was in the paper yesterday, in the
Yeah.
Times yesterday with the Greens.
They do at least are supposed to have some kind of machinery, and those things slip through. With reform, it's just been more of a regular drip. And you've got to, like I said, you've got to be able to get first past the post in multiple constituencies. And one of the things, and one of the reasons that Farage has always failed to get elected before, is that he spots a constituency which he thinks is vulnerable to his brand of exploitation and parachutes himself in. And there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of excitement, there's a celebrity in town, people turn up and they want to get their phones out and they think this is quite fun and all the rest of it. But when it comes down to actually voting, people, I think reform would do better in Clacton if they had kept a candidate who was of Clacton and was going to represent Clacton, because when it comes to the ballot, that's often what matters an awful lot more to quite a lot of people. And interestingly, the reform candidate who was standing in Clacton, who was elbowed out for Mr. Farage, is now decided he is going to stand, but as an independent. And the thing with Farage is that he attracts these other people who just, other people want to protest against him. He's a protest vote, so let's have some other people on the ballot who are going to be a protest against Nigel. He's been beaten by a man in a dolphin suit before because of that. He just attracts these other people that join the ballot next to him, and that splits the vote even further. What he is a disruptor. He's very, very good at disrupting. He wants to disrupt the Conservative Party principally because he doesn't think it's right wing enough, and he hasn't done for about 35 years now. Okay. And he wants to destroy that party because he's got a personal animus against it. But whether or not he actually gets to that point, I think is very much up for debate. Is by no means a done deal.
Let me just, as we've been referring to the Clacton constituency, it is my obligation to read out the candidates now for the Clacton constituency. This is from the Tendring District Council website. So the candidates for the Clacton constituency are Matthew Benslem from the Liberal Democrats, Nigel Farage from Reform UK, Craig Jameson, the Climate Party, Tony Mack, Independent, Natasha Osborne from the Green Party, Jovan Owusu-Nepal from the Labour Party, Tassos Papanstasu from the Heritage Party, Andrew Pemberton from UKIP, No to Illegal Immigration, and Giles Francis Watling, the Conservative Party candidate.